Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the DesignerCon 2024 stage, or bus stop. If you're hanging out at the bus stop with us for the next 30 minutes, you could be talking to Klim from Bigshot Toy Works. His booth is right next to us. Klim represents an interesting individual in the community that you see here. Not only does he create his own toy line of products that he sells straight to consumer, but Klim is one of the industry guys that's here, where several people in this room and clients beyond this room, you are a toy sculptor, correct? You go back in the world of toy sculpting for decades now, and that is a service that you provide for people. So essentially, they have their illustration, they have their sketches, they have their turns, and then this is the man who makes it turn into a real inanimate object, correct?
That is pretty much correct, yeah. We work with a variety of clients, corporate, agency, and also independent artists, and help them bring their vision.
Closer to your mouth.
Help them bring their vision to life. We also help people kind of visualize their idea beyond just the napkin sketch. So we do a lot more than just sculpting. So we help identify the vision and help our clients create marketable products, because it is really easy to just take somebody's drawing and make it into a 3D sculpt and then make it into a toy. And a lot of times those things just do not have a marketplace. Or
So walk me through the process. Like, people give you, art or an idea, and you turn it into an inanimate object, as we're talking about.
Correct.
What are some of the first shocking things that people see once Pinocchio becomes a boy, so to speak, with that metaphor of, like, they have an idea of what it's going to be like. There's got to be a little bit of like a commonality of like shock or kind of blown away once they see it start to look like something that's tangible and real.
Besides the price?
Yeah, I mean, it's not cheap, right?
No, it's not cheap at all. And also, because unless you're a corporation and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in budget for both producing the thing and then also distributing it, an independent artist, most people cannot afford to drop $50,000 to make, 600 or 700 toys.
And that's the ballpark, give or take.
It varies, because a lot of times I look at the product, we can look at the brand that's trying to market and sell it, see their reach into the world, right? Do they have an audience to sell 1,000 of these things at $100 each? And then, help them fit that into some sort of a budget.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not possible. The other shocking thing is sometimes it's just the size of it, because everybody's like, it's gonna be like 14 inches tall, right? It's like Spinal Tap, right? It's like when it's like the Stonehenge, So it's a lot of times it's just people are surprised. We've been very fortunate that I've been doing this long enough where people trust my opinion. So when I tell them something's not gonna work, they usually either ask why and I explain it to them, or they just let me guide the process.
So when we walk around the room here, there are so many different booths and so many different people that are inside the world of toys.
Yeah.
As somebody who's been doing this for decades and both works at the retail side but also on the production side, what are some of the trends that you're identifying? Like, how are people making this much volume? Are you seeing more DIY people get involved that are taking a stab at their own sculpts? Are you seeing technology that's making a lower bar of entry for people? Like, what are you seeing the scene of like production? How is that changing?
It's been a lot more democratized. So 3D printers are getting excellent, like inexpensive. The materials are good. The software is a lot easier to use, a lot more intuitive. So people are just using Blender, using ZBrush on the iPad, just like fucking around with things, and get a $300 3D printer and just make a few things, show them to your friends. And then, how much is this thing gonna cost? You figure out the pricing. Can you sell X amount of these fish-looking Smurf things,
right?
For $100 a piece? How big does it need to be? It's becoming a lot easier for people to make their own stuff, but it's also, we're so early that people don't know what to make, right? When we approach artists, historically for the past 20 years, approach an artist that's successful, that has an audience, like, I want to make a toy with you. And it's been like that with everybody. Kid Robot, Strange Co. back in the day. It's like, hey, I want to make a toy with you. The first thing that artist does, which is a mistake in my opinion, is they look through their old sketchbooks and they try to find a character that would make a good toy. And
you find that's a mistake, to take something that's already been made and try to force it in there. You think they should just dream in that new space?
The thing hasn't been made yet, but it's 5 years out of this artist's repertoire and history and style. So it doesn't really reflect on who they are as a creative right now, or where they're going to be in a year from now when the toy actually ships. So I prefer to direct them into like, hey, what do you like? This is what your work looks like now. These are the options. You can do this, 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 or this. And then we just kind of try to build a character around that or a product around that.
Right.
And most of the time, because again, like I have a history and a track record, right? But a lot of the times people are like, no, I don't want to do that because it's a lot of work. Usually people think, oh, I'm just going to give you a drawing. Magically, toys are going to come in a couple of months and then I'm going to make all this money. And that's never really the case. It's like I equate it with like having a baby, right? It's like, it takes 9 months. You have to date first. You have to figure out if you can work together.
You don't technically have to date first, but I like where you're going with this.
Yeah, I've had enough experience with clients and projects where I want to date first.
Yeah.
Because even like when we structure our contracts, we always leave an out for myself if the client becomes unbearable and unreasonable, and for the client if they think that I'm a dick for telling them not to do something.
Right. So when you're talking about the traditional method of, the way this industry's gone for a while, and it takes time and patience, and then you also know that just because you make a toy doesn't mean you're going to sell a toy. And I think a lot of times people look at something on the shelf and they go, okay, $50 retail times 1,000, I'm going to make 50 grand. And there's so much more to that math than just that basic math. So we both know lots of people with big careers that made a toy, sold the first 25 or 50 or 100 fast,
yes,
and then sit on that back half for years. Like, what are some of the mistakes you see in artists, like maybe like getting quantities that are too big, not understanding that selling a toy is different than selling fine art? Like, even though it seems very legitimized in this room, it still is a niche product. The designer like toy that is bought as a collection that goes on the shelf.
It's very difficult to sell stuff, and people have an overinflated ego sometimes, and they don't have anybody that tells them not to do things because everybody wants to be friends and everybody wants to be happy and everybody wants to like be successful and everybody's like, hey, good job, Yeah,
you'll crush this.
My friend Mumbat, she jokes, she's like, you're the final boss of dream crushing. But she means it sincerely because I've literally like saved people's financial situations because I've told them not to make something and they were, they listened because you don't know what's going to sell. Look at this place. There's thousands of new ideas here. You don't know what's going to hit. There's 24 cute bunny characters. There's 24 cute bunny characters as the robots. So it's more about you developing a personal brand that you can kind of promote using these three-dimensional business cards, basically, because that's essentially what they are. They are a tool to put your IP and your creative identity on the desk of people that support you and love you. Sometimes those people are in corporate offices, and sometimes those people put it on their desk. So when they are walking, when their colleagues are walking by, they're like, oh man, what's that? And then that engages in a conversation that could potentially lead to more discovery for you as an artist and as a brand. Sometimes you can get a contract doing X, Y, and Z. Like I have a bunch of my dumb personal projects that nobody bought that I just sent to my friends.
Right. And
they're sitting in, corporate of Microsoft, and people love displaying them because it's a middle finger unicorn, right?
Right.
So it's like people are like, wow, what the hell is that? It's awesome. And like it tells a story, and then it kind of leads back to your website, your work.
I love talking shop and I love talking to industry, but I also enjoy bringing it down to man or woman on the street that's trying to get into something.
Yeah.
So if somebody were to come through here today, look around at all these booths and go, I want to jump into toy design. I want to make my own toy. What do you think are some of the safest ways to get going down this avenue? Do you make some single ones by hand and test the waters with that, like before you go full on into production?
First of all, like it's a branding issue for the industry. This is not the toy industry. None of this stuff is toys. A toy is something that a kid can play with. These are collectible art objects that are made by artists for other creatives most of the time.
So do you think that we devalue this by using the word toys?
Yes.
So if it were up to you and you were DCon czar, what would we be calling everything that people sell?
Well, I would put it would be just collectible art objects.
Collectible art.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's character based. It'd have to be some sort of a name for it, but it's collectible art because nobody really plays with these things.
I agree. I hope not.
Yeah. So I would say, yeah, collectible art.
So if somebody wants to get into collectible art, would you say first step is maybe doing your own, like
Yes.
like hand sculpting and just doing like originals?
Yeah, you want to make sure that you invest and test the waters, find out what it's like, how the sausage is made, to figure out if you want to be in this business as a business. Because it's easy now to just like hire somebody like me and just give me a bunch of money and you'll get a toy. But you're not really the toy artist. You know, the best way to do it is build your own personal brand by exploring what your characters look like, what the storylines are, what the world is like, and then build the world and like make a couple of single things. You just need to, because of most of the world isn't gonna see your creations in person. They're gonna see them on the phone or on their computer. Right. So they don't need to know that you made 10,000 of something. You could make one, you could tell a good compelling story, and you could build an entire IP around just like one sculpture, like in different situations.
So start off with a proof of concept that you've done yourself, and you bring up a good point. Like most people will see it in digital form, and they don't know if you made 1 or 100 or 100,000. Yes. So that's your proof of concept that gets you started. I remember back in the day, it was like, I knew a dude who knows a guy who has a factory over in China.
Yes.
And now it's like, everybody's like, I got a guy. What is the danger of so many people like just going straight to factory without using somebody like yourself that's a professional that has gone through so much production? Like, the communication's not always great.
Yeah.
Things don't always show up the way that you want them. I've heard plenty of horror stories, but it does seem like now everybody's just like, oh, I could just go, because people want the biggest margin possible.
Yes.
They want to cut out the middleman, not realizing that sometimes the middleman is actually the right man to help you make the proper product.
You need to middle manage the project, you need to middle manage the process, you need to middle manage the creation of the thing, because the ramifications of cost are huge. If you just make a design and say, this is what I want to make, the factory isn't going to tell you what to do.
Right.
If you're an artist, if you're a producer wanting to work with an artist that sells $100,000 paintings, you're not going to tell that artist not to do something. They're going to give you these unrealistic designs that defy gravity, that don't stand.
Right.
And then you have to figure it out. And when it gets fucked up, you're responsible. So it's basically using the middleman. Like, I'm the middleman, but I'm more like a partner than than just a production.
Sure.
Because right now, like literally, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was maybe like 5 people that all wound up using the same factory in China. You just knew how to get in touch with them and knew how to work with them. Right now, there's hundreds of toy producers here that are all producing toys, and they're all working with the same 5 factories, and they're all getting the same pricing, and they're just basically shuffling your information that you give them to a guy in China that if they don't know the right people, they're dealing with the middleman in China who just basically speaks English, goes to the factory and talks to them and does a markup. So there's like multiple layers of costs.
And it also multiple layers of miscommunication. It becomes the game of telephone where a little detail gets misinterpreted through several different ladders of the communication, and then next thing you know, you have a toy that doesn't stand.
There's also the issue of distance, and if for some reason your dude disappears for whatever reason, like we were working with somebody right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they're like disappeared. Nobody knew where they went, and I'm just like calling everybody that I know that might know that person in China, in Southeast Asia that produces with them. Turns out the dude was walking across the street from one factory to another without a mask, and he got arrested.
Wow.
You know, but it's like you have projects, tens of thousands of dollars invested in getting a delivery date. All of a sudden, your key contact, that's the only person that speaks English on the team, is gone. What are you going to do?
Right.
You can't just pack up and go to China in the middle, you know, in the worst case scenario. So those are the things to watch out for. So it's always helpful to work with multiple people in the email chain. So it's not just like one guy
right.
who's got like some weird name, you know, like another Cindy, or you know, like Enjoy, or like another like everybody's got like weird Americanized names,
right?
Because you can't like type it in, you know, in Chinese. So
just makes it familiarized and helps you make an avatar for who your
and right now it's like super competitive. Every single day we get emails from factories that want the business because things are just really rough. For me personally, like I'm very loyal. So I work with the same factory that I work with for the past 12 years.
Oh, wow.
For like all our resin figures, past 12 years. All our vinyl figures, 10 to 12 years. My minifigures, same thing, because we have a clear communication. We're like family, and we treat each other with respect for our craft.
When you get into production, you use PMS colors to match all the different paint?
It's been a nightmare because Adobe Photoshop does not take PMS anymore. So selecting those colors has been very difficult. But yes, we use
How
PMS.
have you worked around that?
Fortunately, the factory that we use for the vinyl production, they are able to, like, they have both books, so we can just tell them what we want, and then they just kind of like, we have a review where they give the PMS color, they have the other color books, and then they just match the paint directly, and they show you a swatch with the mix, and then you say, yes, this looks good.
So when you're working on a toy, collectible art piece.
Yes.
Do you have them, I mean, I know that because I work with China, you get photos of products.
Yes.
But you need to have them actually ship the prototype over to you, right? Because you need to have hands-on kicking of the tires before you could just green light the whole production.
At a certain point, yes. But what I find is that I've done this enough, and the process is always the same, where I don't need to see every single sample unless a client requests it. And then it's additional cost, because if they do a 3D print, they want to approve it. They have to FedEx it over to America. That is like $120, depending on the size of the figure. And then do they make another print, or do they have to send it back to the factory?
Right.
So it's like just a huge amount of delays. For me, it's like we know the model shop that we're using replicates our work perfectly as long as we scale it right. They're like, this is like 12 millimeters, whatever. You know, we get the bounding box with the figure, and then we approve the size, and then it comes out and it looks exactly like the figure. You know, it's like these, like this shark here, for instance. Like it's the exact same model as, you know, this shark right here.
But just different scale.
Different scale, yes.
So you remember when you were a kid and you went to the mall and they had that faucet and the water was coming out of the faucet, and you're like, how did the faucet get there? And then you're like, oh, because there's a pipe that's the faucet's attached to, but the water's falling out of it, so it looks like it's floating, right?
Yeah.
That's a magic trick.
Yes.
Let's talk about the magic trick of making toys stand up on their own. Because there's so many different ways to like hide where an arm touches the ground, or you know what I mean? Like there's some really clever ways to make collectible art pieces that don't necessarily always have 2 legs or 4 legs. There's really clever ways to make somebody lean on something, or to, you know, a different little trick to make it actually where it can stand independently.
Yes.
There's an art to that. There's a science to that, right?
It's a very, like there's an art to the retaining the the character design and personality within the pose that you're trying to achieve, so it doesn't look janky and stupid. So it still has like movement and the action that you want to represent. And then it's all about choosing the right materials to make that work, because you might use injection molded PVC that's one durometer for the body, or the rotor molded vinyl, but then you use like injection molded plastic for the legs. Sometimes.
So you're working with weight so that a lighter head might sit on a more sturdy torso and legs.
Correct, yes. And then.
Because designers love to make these big ass heads with these little bodies and these little legs.
And like a tiny little neck that's like this.
So there's a neck that goes up through it, and that creates this vertical reinforcement.
Yeah. And it just all depends project to project.
How do you figure this out though? Like, do you know enough where you can do that digitally? Do you have to hand sculpt it? Like, how can you figure out how long that internal neck needs to be so that 8-inch head can sit on that 3-inch body?
A lot of the times it's just like experience visually, like the balance of what's going to work or what's not going to work. If you feel that it's not going to work, maybe just do a couple of test prints to see what happens. Like right now we're doing another project for Adult Swim. We've done like all of their Rick and Morty 3D work, from everything from like minifigures on the Rickmobile to like the giant sculptures at their activations. And it's all just using the same model, just figuring out the process. And with stuff like Rick is super thin, right? With a big head.
Yeah.
So you just figure out what's the best possible scenario, how it's going to work. And then you work with the engineers at the factory who are going to be doing the tooling to see like, how can we hollow out the head so it's the absolute minimum amount of material? And then what kind of plastics do we use for the neck, for the upper body, for the legs? And then you also have to have the base. And many people do not like bases on their figures.
Yes.
But that is not a negotiable
For some
argument.
characters, you have to do the base.
Correct.
So when you talk about, you do it from experience, but you also might have to make a print or a test. Yeah. You do that in-house 3D?
We do the 3D in-house. We don't own any 3D printers. We, like, in the States, we work with my friend Jason Wires, who's got a full range of 3D printers, and he exclusively works for the collectible industry and just prints statues, action figures for Diamond, statues for Sideshow. But not only does he print them, he also makes the paint masters. So if somebody wants something that's a little bit more fancy, like a Sideshow statue that doesn't have PMS colors, that has color, right?
Yeah.
So you like, the first paint master has to be given to an artist that not only understands the color dynamics translated from an illustration, but also just understand production, because it's great. Wow, look at this beautiful sculpture, it's painted amazing, but imagine repeating it at the factory level 1,000 times, and it has to be perfect every time because somebody's spending $1,000 on a statue.
Right.
When they see the eye going this way and the other eye going this way, that is a big fuck up that they're not going to be happy about. They're not going to buy another statue from you. So it's like a lot of it's just production. So we don't.
But you would do a print, like when you say test print.
Yes.
Somewhere domestically.
Yes.
You're getting a 3D print made.
Yeah.
Just to kick the tires on it once again.
Oh yeah.
Before you go full on.
Yeah.
Mass production overseas.
We've done that domestically, but we also do that on a regular basis with our partners in China. That's like they take the file, they engineer it the best they possibly can once we give them the engineering. And then they'll do a print, and they'll assess what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. They're gonna make their recommendations, and then that's kind of like the hill that I die on with the client. It's like, you can't do this, it's not gonna work, because once they want to push with it, if the project gets fucked up, it's no longer my responsibility.
Right. So work me through this. Where would you say the collectible industry's at right now? Do you feel like it's strong? You feel like more people are getting into it? You feel like people are dipping out? Like, do you feel like it's kind of been the same for a while? Like, where would you guess the trajectory is on all of this?
Chaos. Overabundance of attention-seeking visual candy. It's thousands of artists all over the world. It's like you go here, it's just people from everywhere: Japan, Singapore, China, Hong Kong, everywhere. So there's an overabundance of incredible shit, but it's the same. Like the collector base has not expanded because we're not telling the right stories to encourage other people coming in.
And that, do you think that not telling the right story comes from things like label them as toys?
Any what?
You say you were not telling the right story to recruit new people. Do you think that part of that not telling the right story is telling the story that these are all called toys?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too, it's like, it's there's not enough kicking the tires with different IP, different ideas. People are trying to find what works. And doing new things that nobody's seen before is hard.
Right.
And then right now, the other thing that's happening is people are prototyping things using AI. So instead of coming up with a story and an idea and what the character looks like, spending weeks or months on different iterations, people would just type a bunch of words like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then they call somebody like me and like, hey, I have this IP that I want to turn. It's like, that's not really IP. That's just punched your face into a keyboard and like you just got this thing that you want to make. There's nobody's going to care about it because I can do the same thing. I can just type a bunch of words, you know, so there's...
So you feel like it's important for items to have a backstory, so there's a character, an audience, and people actually care and are invested in the figure.
Whether it's a story or the personality of the creator, you know, it's like somebody has to have the character that people, and the character personality and the presence that people want to connect with and invest money and time in, because essentially you are asking people to take whatever it is that you created and put it into their home, be part of their life, and hopefully make a difference in their day-to-day interactions with their space. You just kind of bring a little bit of joy, right?
So when you're working with an independent creator, what's the hardest part about working with artists versus working with, say, a Cartoon Network? Is it limited budget because it's an individual?
I think that the hardest part is the budget, because I love collaborating. Like my best times working with people was like, you know, working with Ron, working with Frank, working with Jermaine, you know, like working with independent artists who are trying to like visualize their thing and they want to let me into their world to kind of bring it out into 3D and just like bullshitting ideas, coming up with concepts. Like instead of just like them giving me a drawing, I prefer to like look at the body of work and pick something out. Like I work with Stephen Harrington, and Stephen's just like releasing a new figure this week that we produced for him last year. And it's like his painting of like his character Mello holding a canvas. And like, you know, he was gonna have it be like very static, no articulation. And like I kind of figured it out where there's a lot more motion, a lot more life to the piece. But it's like, working with artists is best because it's collaborative, but it's also like financially, it's rough.
So walk me through this. You work with a lot of the biggest artists in this room. Like you just mentioned Ron English, Frank Kozik, Jermaine Rogers. Mm-hmm. You called them all on a first name basis, which is cute. When you walk into their booth and you see this item that everybody's lined up to get, and they all want to buy it, it's the hot new item, and you know that you're a part of that project, where's your pride in there? Because, you know, it's one of these guys that are going to get all the credit because it's their IP and it's their character and their world. But you were a part of that. Like, where's your pride in that?
If the line is out the door and everybody's happy when they buy it, I feel super proud.
Yeah.
And even if the line is not out the door, I try to do the best job that I can to be proud of everything that I do. And like, to me, it's like, it's not my project. You know, I basically...
But there's a bit of you in there.
Of course. It depends on how much they let me be in it.
Right.
Like I've worked with some very strict artists. Like we did a line called for Stan's Collectibles, like all the UFC and WWE stuff with Tracy Teboera. And Tracy has a very distinct style, and he's like a very immaculate art director. Every single line has to be perfect. Like so much so that it's like Jesus Christ, it's the fucking armpit. But you know, it's like that project. It looks exactly like his work. Yeah. And that was my job, is to make it look exactly like his piece popping off the page and out of his head. And I'm proud of that. Yeah. But like,
That's a different kind of challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So then on the other side, when you're working with your corporate clients, What's the hard part of that process? Because I mean, when it is, say, Rick and Morty, it's very defined what those characters look like. We know their proportions, we know their personalities. Does that make it easier that they feel like real people, or is it difficult because just the littlest detail off, it doesn't feel like them?
I've been fortunate to like be able, like that's my superpower, is like to take the thing and make it look exactly like it should in 3D. Like working with my sculptors and like my team and just kind of art directing them to death to make sure, like, you know, pixel fucking the shit out of it just to make sure that it, like every single thing is right. But the hardest part of working with corporate clients is approvals. Because there's legal, there's, you know, everybody's an art director, and everybody wants to have ownership of something that they're building that's really, really cool and everybody's excited about. You know, it's like the best corporate gigs that we've had was when like some art director in the back room had an idea for a pitch, and nobody was just like, yeah, whatever, let him do this thing. And then he would hire me and let me do my thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this thing's fucking winning Clio Awards. It's like a full-on TV campaign, and everybody's like, holy shit, let's promote that guy.
Yeah.
Because he knows what he's doing. And we're just like fucking around. Like, so let's promote. They promoted him to head of creative, right? It's like, great. And then the next team is like, oh, we're going to use Klim because he's going to get us to be the head of creative next time.
Right.
And then they didn't realize that it was a collaboration. That it was like me letting him direct me, and then me taking that direction, him giving me enough room to do what I do best.
Right.
These guys they spent more money because they're like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to blow the budget. We're going to balloon it up 3x, you know. And we gave them the same creative back, but they kept art directing because they wanted to have ownership of the ideas,
right,
instead of collaborating. So they would just pick like the least interesting thing because everybody in the room liked it. And then once legal got involved, it was like,
that's when the real fun starts.
Stupid things like the color, right? Like literally, it's like it was a black character, just black, because it's a salt shaker. Oh, it's a pepper shaker. The legal department it's like the black pepper shaker, right? White salt shaker. The legal department was like, can you make the black less black? Because some people might get offended. It's like, who are those people? You know, so we had to run through the tweaks and the changes and show them that the less black just looks stupid. And then, you know, they went back to it. But it's like legal and approval is like the worst thing. And then the other thing too is getting paid.
Oh.
Corporate payment structure is completely fucked. Net 60, net 30 if you're lucky. And you're just kind of sitting, just hoping that you get your money. The nice thing now is like working with companies that do on-chain work, that pay, like working with Vivi, for instance. Like I work with David on like the Ron English collection and work with him on some Frank stuff. There was an insane amount of work. It was like $30,000 invoice. I was like, okay, here's this. He's like, oh great, send me an invoice. I sent him an invoice. He's like, okay, you've been paid. And I was like, wait, what? Yeah, and like he's like, yeah, check your bank. I have never experienced that. Usually it's like you have to chase people. Why I stopped working for Hasbro and Mattel is because you have net 60, and sometimes the person that hired you for the project's been fired from the company.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Not only is the person that hired you was fired, but all the people you're working with, they're getting their auto deposit on the 1st and the 15th.
Yeah.
They're getting paid while good old Klim's just sitting over there being like, can I please get my money now? And begging. And yeah, it's bullshit how that gets managed. And it makes it really hard to manage your own company and your own cash flow.
Well, because I have freelance full-time staff that I have to pay.
Sure.
I do not, they send me an invoice, I pay it right away.
Right.
Because that is how I maintain a good reputation.
That's how you keep your team.
Yeah, exactly. Like they get paid first. So when it's like it takes a month, it takes 2 months. And like we've had instances where it's like, oh, Jimmy's no longer with the company and we're gonna have to resubmit your invoice. It's gonna be another 30 days. Like, I'm still sitting there waiting on this. So like I'm really excited about the payment systems of the future that are coming.
Right.
Because right now, like me and my team, we launched like an NFT project using like these little characters. It was like a promotional thing. It was like free mint, like only like, it was like $1 or something it cost to mint the project. And we got a creator reward for that. We minted like 46,000 pieces and we got like $40,000, like real money. But, you know, beforehand, I was like, yeah, when I'm gonna mint it, it's gonna, whatever's gonna happen. And so like the guy to help us with the project, I gave him a percentage. Mark, who helped me with the animations and the art direction, I gave him a percentage. Benny, who helped project management, gave him a percentage. You know, I was like, yeah, whatever. It's like, what's it gonna be? Like a few bucks.
Right.
And we got like, you know, $43,000.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like the same week, like Mark, you know, his computer died. And I was like, he's like, dude, look in your bank account. And I was like, he's like $8,000. Like my Benny, who does project management for me, he's like having trouble paying rent because he was like, he puts on New York Comic-Con for a bunch of art toy stuff. So he was like in debt. I was like, look in your bank account. He got $8,000.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, it was instant. And then like last week, I was like, oh, let me check that account. You know, and there's like an extra $2,000 in it because there's secondary sales.
And with the NFT stuff, when you're making digital goods, you basically roll through all the steps except for actual physical production.
Yes. You do all of the pre-production work. You do all of the marketing, all of the development, all of the story. You just do not cut steel. You do not make molds. You do not make any plastic. There's a different process of taking the assets, rigging them, skinning them, animating them. But you can turn things around in a week where it would take you 9 months to create something tangible. Like
because you're going all the way up to the edge of production and that's where it stops because that piece lives in a digital ecosystem.
Correct.
What are you looking to accomplish with your company next year?
I want to keep making physical things with creators and artists, but my big dream is to set up shop in some form of a metaverse and be Santa Claus.
Explain.
So there's a lot of companies that are putting together metaverses, like Vivi's one of them. There's others where you can own or stake virtual real estate that people go to, like an address, right? So the idea is, and it's been like, I've been brain farting it for like about 3 years, is to get a plot of land, build a digital experience store, sort of like a Kid Robot or a Super Plastic Shop, where you can do monthly drops with creators and artists that we develop in-house with them, not physical goods, digital goods, build little collections, maybe physical things for later, but offer fun, creative experiences with our friends and not have to worry about making the physical thing, not have to worry about tariffs in China, not have to worry about, because like I have clients that are like, oh yeah, man, what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, it's like, oh, let's just do it. What's the worst thing? So I just say, you know what's the worst thing that can happen? Google container ships disasters.
What's that?
Container ships disasters.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the last step that nobody thinks about, right? That's the absolute last step of like the stuff leaving a factory. They send you a picture of the truck with the doors closed of all your boxes in it. They're like, pay up, see you later, good luck, thank you very much. Then the thing goes on a boat. And sometimes those boats sink. Or sometimes there's a storm and those containers just go flying off. Like I've seen like that happen to us when I was working for a toy company in New York. We were at Toy Fair and we had like prototypes going to our showroom, and the plane that those prototypes were under got blown out in Far Rockaway, Queens. It was like 92, 93, I think. And all our prototypes are gone.
Wow.
You know, so it's like, you never know. It's like you kind of, so that's why like.
And the toy developer eats that cost.
Not only that, the entire staff that's at Toy Fair waiting to talk about these awesome products.
And they never show.
It's just an empty showroom.
Wow.
Just an empty fucking showroom.
Well, thank you so much, Klim, for sharing some of your experiences with us. I know that you've been in this industry for a long time. Nobody knows it better than you. Fun to talk about how the productions worked, how you're seeing the different trends come and go. And it's always exciting for me to know that you are a part of those big drops and like sort of the quiet hand in some of these pieces.
I'm been very, very fortunate with with the kind of people that I've been rolling with, and I think it just being kind, honest, and like not being a prick just really helps.
I would describe you that way. I would describe you that way.
Yeah, I mean it's like this, like there's no point in this being for this to be stressful because there's no money in it.
That's a great way to put it. We will be coming back on the stage at 5 o'clock, where I'll be joined by the creative director from Meow Wolf. So if that is something you're interested in, we're going to be talking about experiential design, and we'll be doing it right here at 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Oh, sweet.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
I appreciate you, bud.
Thank you.